You make $120,000 a year. That number, when you first heard it, probably felt like arrival, like you had finally crossed some invisible line where money stops being a source of stress and starts becoming a source of freedom. That feeling made sense. It was logical. It was earned. But then the paychecks started hitting, and something felt off. Not dramatically off, not crisis level off, just quietly, persistently off. Like there's a slow leak somewhere in the system that you can't quite find, no matter how many times you check the numbers. You're earning more than 80% of American households, and yet, somehow, the math never fully adds up at the end of the month. Let's start with the number itself. $120,000 sounds substantial, because in many parts of this country, it genuinely is. But we're not talking about many parts of the country. We're talking about the cities where most high-paying professional jobs actually exist. New York, San Francisco, Boston, Seattle, Los Angeles, Washington, D.C. Those cities change the math completely. The first thing that changes the math is taxes. Federal income tax at that salary level puts you firmly in the 22 to 24% bracket. Then add state income tax, which in California can climb past 9%, in New York past 6%, then FICA, Social Security, Medicare. Suddenly that 120,000 starts shedding thousands before you ever see it. After federal, state, Social Security, and Medicare deductions, $120,000 in a high-tax state like California or New York often becomes somewhere between $78,000 and $84,000 in actual take-home pay. That's the real number. That's what you actually have to work with. And that realization, honestly, hits differently than most people expect. $80,000, roughly $6,600 a month. Now let's talk about where that goes, because this is where the story really begins. Housing is the first and largest drain, and in major American cities, housing has transformed over the last decade from an expense into something closer to a financial siege. The median rent for a one-bedroom apartment in San Francisco sits above $3,000. In Manhattan, you're looking at similar territory, often higher. Even in secondary markets like Austin, Denver, or Miami, rents have surged past $2,500 for anything decent. A two-bedroom, if you have a family or simply want a functional home office, pushes those numbers significantly further. Let's run a real scenario. You're in Chicago, which is actually one of the more affordable major cities. You earn $120,000. After taxes, you take home roughly $86,000 a year. You rent a two-bedroom apartment in a safe, professional neighborhood. That's around $2,200 a month. Add utilities, internet, renter's insurance, you're now at roughly $2,600 monthly just for the place you sleep. That's $31,200 a year on housing alone. Nearly 40% of your after-tax income gone before you've bought a single meal, filled your gas tank, or paid a single bill. And that's Chicago, one of the cheaper options among major American cities. The pressure compounds significantly in coastal metros. The math in San Francisco or New York is nearly incomprehensible by comparison. Now add transportation. If you're in a city with functional public transit, maybe you're spending $200 a month on passes, occasional rides, a bike. But most American cities aren't built that way. Car ownership for professionals in cities like Dallas, Houston, Atlanta, or even parts of Los Angeles isn't a luxury, it's structural. It's the only realistic way to function. A modest car payment runs $400 to $500 a month. Insurance for a professional in an urban zip code, factoring in the post-pandemic rate increases, runs another $150 to $250 monthly. Gas, maintenance, registration, parking, you're now at $800 a month conservatively just to move yourself around. That's nearly $10,000 a year vanishing into transportation alone. We're roughly 12 paragraphs into this, and we haven't touched groceries, healthcare, student loans, or retirement contributions yet. That's deliberate, because the point is to feel this the same way people actually feel it, incrementally, expense by expense, each one reasonable on its own, each one quietly, methodically reducing what's left. Groceries for a single professional eating reasonably well in a major American city now cost between $600 and $900 a month. If you have a partner, that number approaches $1,200. If you have children, you're already past that. Food inflation since 2020 has structurally repriced everyday items in ways that feel almost invisible because the increases came gradually, category by category, product by product. Healthcare is its own chapter. If your employer covers a significant portion of your premium, consider yourself genuinely fortunate. But even with employer contributions, most professionals at this income level are paying $200 to $400 monthly out of pocket for premiums alone. Then deductibles, copays, dental, vision. A single unexpected medical event can cost thousands before insurance meaningfully kicks in. Student loans exist in a significant portion of this conversation. The professionals most likely earning $120,000 in major cities are often those who attended graduate school, law school, business school, or specialized technical programs. Average graduate debt loads for those cohorts sit between $60,000 and over $200,000. Monthly payments of $500 to $1,200 are not unusual. That's real money. That's real pressure. Let's pause here for a moment, because I think this is worth sitting with. You've done everything right. You studied hard, you built a career, you landed a salary that most people in this country will never see. And yet, you're sitting in your apartment, running the numbers for the fourth time this week, wondering where it all goes. That feeling isn't a personal failure. It's structural, it's systemic, and it's real. The retirement contribution piece layers in another dimension. Financial advisors consistently recommend saving 15 to 20% of gross income for retirement to maintain your standard of living in your later years. On a $120,000 salary, that's $18,000 to $24,000 annually. Even if you max your 401k at $23,000 per year, that's money leaving your monthly cash flow. Necessary, rational, but it compresses what's available today. Add it up. Housing at $31,000 annually, transportation at $10,000, groceries at $9,000, healthcare premiums at $4,000, student loan payments at $8,000, retirement contributions at $23,000. That's $85,000, and we're being conservative in several of those categories. Your after-tax income in many of these cities doesn't stretch past $86,000. The math is essentially solved, and not in your favor. There's almost nothing left. No meaningful buffer, no real discretionary spending, no significant saving beyond the retirement contributions already counted. This is what financial tightness actually looks like at $120,000 in a major American city. It's not dramatic poverty. It's something quieter and in some ways harder to articulate because the salary number makes it feel like you shouldn't be struggling. The behavioral economics layer of this is fascinating and genuinely worth understanding. There's a concept called lifestyle normalization. When your income increases, your reference point for what feels normal shifts almost automatically. You start living in the kinds of neighborhoods, eating at the kinds of restaurants, and maintaining the kinds of appearances that feel consistent with your income level. This isn't vanity, it's social and professional context. But lifestyle normalization becomes a trap when your actual purchasing power of your income doesn't match the social expectations attached to your income number. You're earning a salary that carries certain assumptions: a decent apartment, a reliable car, occasional dining out, a vacation once a year. But the structural cost of maintaining even a modest version of that life in a major city now frequently exceeds what the after-tax income actually delivers. That gap is the quiet crisis. Inflation made this worse, and in ways that are not fully visible in the headline numbers. The Consumer Price Index captures broad price movement, but it doesn't capture the specific basket of goods and services that high-cost urban professionals actually consume. Housing in major metros, professional services, quality food, urban health care, education. These categories inflated at rates that significantly exceeded the headline CPI figures during the 2021 through 2024 period. Think of it this way. The income feels like a strong current moving you forward, but underneath there's a countercurrent, invisible, structural, persistent. Taxes are pulling from above, housing is pulling from the side, inflation is eroding the purchasing power of every dollar that survives the first 2 rounds of extraction, and most people working at this level don't have the time or framework to see the full picture clearly. They just feel tired. That exhaustion is worth naming because it's one of the most consistent experiences among professionals in this income range in high-cost cities. Not despair, not crisis, just a persistent low-grade financial fatigue. The feeling that no matter how hard you work, no matter how much you earn, the gap between where you are and where you expect it to be by now never seems to close the way it should.
And that expectation gap is important because it's not irrational. It's based on a mental model of how income and wealth accumulation are supposed to work. You earn more, you save more, you build more. That model worked reasonably well for previous generations, but several structural shifts have quietly broken the mechanism in ways that don't get discussed clearly enough in mainstream financial conversation. The first structural shift is the decoupling of wage growth with asset price growth. Over the last 2 decades, real wages for professional workers have grown modestly, but the assets those wages are supposed to help you acquire, primarily housing and investment portfolios, have inflated dramatically. The result is a widening gap between what you earn and what those earnings can actually purchase in terms of long-term wealth. Homeownership illustrates this precisely. In 1990, the median home price in the United States was roughly $80,000. At a median household income of around $30,000, that represented about 2.5 times annual income. Today, the median home in a major metropolitan area often exceeds $500,000, sometimes dramatically so. At $120,000 in income, that's still over 4 times your gross salary before taxes compress the picture further. The down payment math alone is staggering. 20% on a $500,000 home is $100,000. Saving that amount while covering the expenses we've already outlined isn't a 5-year plan. It's often closer to a decade, assuming nothing goes wrong. And in that decade, home prices frequently continue moving upward, resetting the target every time you get close. The finish line moves. That's not a metaphor. That's the actual mechanism. The second structural shift is the privatization of financial risk. 30 years ago, defined benefit pension plans were common among professional workers. Employers carried the investment risk. Employees contributed their labor and received a predictable income in retirement. That model has been largely dismantled and replaced with defined contribution plans, primarily 401ks, where the employee bears the full weight of investment decisions, market timing, contribution discipline, and longevity risk. This shift matters enormously at $120,000 because it means retirement security is no longer something that happens to you through an institution. It's something you have to engineer yourself from your own cash flow while competing with all the other demands on that same cash flow. And if you fall behind in your contributions for even a few years, the compounding math makes recovery increasingly difficult as you age. The third structural shift is healthcare privatization and cost transfer. Employer-sponsored healthcare used to represent a genuine, substantial benefit that meaningfully offset living costs. Today, even with employer contributions, premium costs, deductibles, and out-of-pocket maximums have shifted so significantly toward the employee that healthcare is now a major line item in any honest household budget. One serious illness, one unexpected surgery can destabilize finances at this income level with alarming speed. Here's a hypothetical that illustrates the pressure concisely. Imagine 2 colleagues, both earn $120,000. One lives in Nashville, owns a modest home purchased 5 years ago when prices were lower, has employer-covered health care, and carries no student debt. The other lives in Seattle, rents, carries $90,000 in student loans, and pays $400 monthly in healthcare premiums. Same salary, completely different financial realities. Circumstance is doing most of the work. That scenario isn't about choices or discipline. It's about timing, geography, and structural access.
The colleague in Nashville didn't necessarily make smarter decisions. They entered the housing market before prices moved. They graduated before tuition escalated to current levels. They landed at an employer with better benefits. These variables are largely outside individual control, yet they produce dramatically different financial outcomes on identical incomes. That truth is uncomfortable but necessary to acknowledge. The psychological dimension of all this deserves serious attention. There's a phenomenon well documented in behavioral economics called relative deprivation. It describes the experience of feeling financially behind or inadequate, not in absolute terms, but relative to your peer group and your own expectations. Professionals earning $120,000 in major cities frequently experience this because their reference group, their colleagues, their neighborhood, their social context, sets a financial baseline that their income struggles to meet. This creates a specific kind of stress that's difficult to discuss openly. You cannot credibly complain about financial pressure at $120,000 without being immediately dismissed. The number shuts down the conversation before it starts. So the stress becomes internalized, unexamined. It shows up as a persistent low-level anxiety about money that seems irrational from the outside, but makes complete logical sense once you actually run the numbers in context. The social silence around this itself is part of the problem, because when high-earning professionals can't have honest conversations about financial pressure, they can't make clear-eyed decisions either. They optimize the wrong variables. They feel shame instead of strategy. They assume the problem is personal discipline rather than structural economics, and that misdiagnosis leads to the wrong solutions. Better budgeting apps don't fix a housing market. Cutting coffee doesn't offset 10% annual rent increases. What actually helps, and this is where the conversation needs to land, is clear structural awareness. Understanding that this pressure is real, documented, and not a reflection of personal failure is the necessary first step. It reframes the problem from a character question to a strategic one, and strategic problems have strategic responses, even when those responses are difficult, slow, or require significant trade-offs. Geographic arbitrage is one of the most powerful levers available to professionals at this income level, particularly as remote work has expanded access to location flexibility. Moving from San Francisco to Austin, from New York to Raleigh, from Los Angeles to Phoenix doesn't require a salary reduction for many professional roles today, but it can reduce your effective cost of living by 30 to 40%. That's not a small optimization, that's a structural financial reset. Tax optimization is another lever that many professionals at this income level underutilize. Maxing your 401k reduces your taxable income. Health savings accounts, if you're on a qualifying high-deductible plan, offer triple tax advantages that are genuinely powerful over a decade. Qualified opportunity zones, real estate deductions, capital gains timing, these aren't aggressive maneuvers. They're the legal architecture of the tax code used by every sophisticated financial planner. Most employees at this income level leave significant tax savings uncaptured simply because no one walked them through the structure. Asset accumulation strategy matters more than income optimization beyond a certain threshold. The professionals who build real wealth at this income level are rarely the ones who earn slightly more. They're the ones who converted their savings into assets systematically and early. Indexed fund contributions, real estate equity, business ownership, even modest angel investments. The mechanism of compounding works at any income level, but it requires consistent contributions over time and a clear-eyed understanding of what you're building toward. Reconnect for a moment to where we started. You make $120,000. You've done the work, you've earned the number, and yet the money feels thin. The month ends with less than you expected. The financial freedom you anticipated feels perpetually one promotion away. That experience isn't a bug in your thinking, it's an accurate reading of a genuinely distorted system. The distortion is real. The tax structure, the housing market, the healthcare system, the student debt ecosystem, the inflation and professional urban living, these are not abstractions. They are concrete forces extracting real dollars from real people who earned those dollars with real effort. Seeing them clearly doesn't fix them immediately, but it does change how you respond to them, and the response is where everything actually happens.
The most grounded perspective I can offer is this. The number on your offer letter was never the whole story. It was always just the starting point. What matters is the architecture you build around that number, how you structure your taxes, where you choose to live and why, how aggressively you convert income into assets, how clearly you understand the forces working against accumulation in your specific context. That architecture is the actual determinant of financial outcomes. There's a certain kind of quiet clarity that comes from understanding your situation accurately, without illusion in either direction, not telling yourself you're failing when the system is applying structural pressure, but also not assuming the pressure will ease on its own without deliberate strategic response. Both of those are forms of self-deception, and both will cost you. Accurate perception, as uncomfortable as it sometimes is, remains the only reliable foundation for sound financial decisions. The $120,000 salary is a real asset. It's a platform. Used with clear awareness of the forces working against it, it can absolutely build meaningful wealth over time. The professionals who achieve that aren't necessarily smarter or more disciplined. They're clearer. They understand the game they're actually playing, not the one they assumed they'd signed up for. And that clarity, consistently applied, is worth more than any individual tactic or tool. You're not behind because you made mistakes. You're navigating a system that was never designed to feel easy at any income level, because comfort tends to reduce labor supply, and labor supply is the point. Understanding that doesn't solve everything, but it stops you from directing energy inward that belongs directed outward,
At the structural levers you actually have access to, at the architecture you can genuinely build. That work is slower than you'd like, but it's real and it's yours.
Geographic arbitrage is one of the most powerful levers available to professionals at this income level, particularly as remote work has expanded access to location flexibility. Moving from San Francisco to Austin, from New York to Raleigh, from Los Angeles to Phoenix doesn't require a salary reduction for many professional roles today, but it can reduce your effective cost of living by 30 to 40%. That's not a small optimization. That's a structural financial reset. Tax optimization is another lever that many professionals at this level underutilize. Maxing your 401k reduces your taxable income. Health savings accounts, if you're on a qualifying high-deductible plan, offer triple tax advantages that are genuinely powerful over a decade. Qualified opportunity zones, real estate deductions, capital gains timing, these aren't aggressive maneuvers. They're the legal architecture of the tax code used by every sophisticated financial planner. Most employees at this income level leave significant tax savings uncaptured simply because no one walked them through the structure. Asset accumulation strategy matters more than income optimization beyond a certain threshold. The professionals who build real wealth at this income level are rarely the ones who earn slightly more. They're the ones who converted their savings into assets systematically and early. Index fund contributions, real estate equity, business ownership, even modest angel investments. The mechanism of compounding works at any income level, but it requires consistent contributions over time and a clear-eyed understanding of what you're building toward. You're not behind because you made mistakes. You're navigating a system that was never designed to feel easy at any income level, because comfort tends to reduce labor supply, and labor supply is the point. Understanding that doesn't solve everything, but it stops you from directing energy inward that belongs directed outward, at the structural levers you actually have access to, at the architecture you can genuinely build. That work is slower than you'd like, but it's real, and it's yours.